Boundaries are a form of self-respect, Stoic wisdom explained. No person will have the power to insult you unless you surrender that power. Epictetus, welcome back to Equanimous Fortitude, where we explore timeless truths for modern power. If you're new here, welcome in. This channel is dedicated to helping you develop quiet strength, mental clarity, and unshakable presence, using the wisdom of the Stoics. And if you're returning, I appreciate your commitment to building something stronger within yourself. In a world that constantly demands your energy, attention, and compliance, there exists a quiet form of personal sovereignty that few truly master. I've spent years studying it and even longer practicing it. Today's topic is one most people struggle with, even if they never acknowledge it aloud. Boundaries. Most people set boundaries only after they've been violated, a reactive defense born from hurt or anger. But what if boundaries were something entirely different? Not the reactive kind triggered by frustration, not the desperate lines drawn after being pushed too far, but the kind that are calm, consistent, unapologetic. Stoic boundaries don't need to be explained or defended. They aren't requests, they're declarations. They emerge naturally from self-respect, and that foundation alone makes them unassailable. In this session, we'll explore why individuals of genuine substance don't chase external validation, don't over-explain their limits, and never seek permission to honor their own nature. Because to the Stoic mind, boundaries are not walls built from fear. They are expressions of inner clarity, the natural perimeter of a life lived with intention. And when you live with that kind of clarity, the world begins to adjust to you, rather than you constantly adjusting to it. Today, we'll explore not just the philosophy, but the practice of this quiet power, this still strength that requires no validation because it stands on the bedrock of self-knowledge. Let's begin. Part 1. The Stoic view of boundaries. The disciplined minds of ancient Rome and Greece didn't speak directly of boundaries as we conceive of them today, but they understood deeply the concept of differentiating between what is within our control and what lies beyond it. This, in essence, is the philosophical foundation of all healthy boundaries. Epictetus, who began his life as a slave, wrote, "Make the best use of what is in your power, and take the rest as it happens." This isn't passive resignation, it's strategic focus. By drawing clear lines around what truly belongs to you, your judgments, your values, your actions, you reclaim your sovereignty. Marcus Aurelius, Emperor of Rome, would remind himself daily, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength." Even a man who commanded the known world understood that true power begins with internal boundaries. Philosophers of mental clarity don't waste energy trying to control what cannot be controlled. Instead, they invest fully in what is theirs alone, their character, their intentions, their responses. At its core, Stoicism teaches us that boundaries are not primarily an external defense against others, but an internal discipline of self-mastery. They begin not with what you demand from others, but with what you expect from yourself. Part 2. The people-pleasing trap. Before we explore the framework of Stoic boundaries, we must understand what prevents most from establishing them in the first place. The need for approval is perhaps humanity's heaviest chain. We compromise our time, our energy, our values, all to avoid the discomfort of another's disapproval. We say yes when we mean no. We take on burdens that aren't ours to carry. We tolerate what should not be tolerated. Why? 3 primary reasons. Fear of rejection. The Stoics understood that our social nature makes rejection painful, but they also knew that living in fear of it creates a life that isn't truly our own. As Epictetus observed, It is impossible for a man to learn what he thinks he already knows. Similarly, it is impossible to live authentically while constantly adapting to others' expectations. This fear manifests in countless subtle ways. Consider how often you've caught yourself qualifying your opinions. I might be wrong, but, or, this is just my perspective, but. These verbal hedges reveal an underlying anxiety. If my view is rejected, at least I've cushioned the blow by preemptively diminishing its importance. Or notice how difficult it can be to simply say no without adding justifications, explanations, or apologies. The simple sentence, "I can't attend," becomes, "I'm so sorry, but I can't make it because," lengthy explanation, "but maybe next time if conditional offer." This verbal padding reveals our discomfort with potential disapproval. The Stoic practice involves recognizing these patterns and stripping away these hedges and padding. Not to be rude or abrupt, but to speak plainly from a place of self-respect. When you trust the validity of your own boundaries, you need fewer words to express them. Ego attachment. Often we avoid setting boundaries because we've attached our identity to being needed, to being liked, to being the one who can handle everything. This ego attachment, what the Stoics would call a faulty impression, keeps us tethered to external validation. I see this frequently in high achievers who pride themselves on their capacity to endure, to deliver, to be reliable above all else. Their boundary setting is compromised not by lack of strength, but by an identity constructed around exceptional endurance. To say, "This is too much," feels like failure rather than wisdom. Seneca addressed this directly. It is not the man who has too little, but the man who craves more, who is poor. Similarly, it is not the person who does too little, but the person who takes on too much, who ultimately accomplishes less of what truly matters. The Stoic practice here involves examining your attachments to particular identities. Are you the reliable one who never says no, the peacekeeper who avoids necessary conflict, the strong one who never admits to overwhelm? These identity attachments must be recognized and loosened before clear boundaries can emerge. False responsibility. We convince ourselves that others' reactions are our responsibility. The Stoic rejects this premise entirely, understanding that each person is responsible for their own judgments and emotions. This confusion of responsibility is perhaps the most insidious barrier to healthy boundaries. We think, if I decline this invitation, they'll be disappointed, and that's my fault. Or, if I speak my mind, they might feel criticized, and that would make me unkind. But consider Marcus Aurelius's perspective. The soul becomes dyed with the color of its thoughts. Others' emotions are colored by their own thoughts and judgments, not by your boundaries. Their disappointment stems from their expectations, their assumptions, their desires. While we should not deliberately hurt others, we cannot and should not manage their internal responses. The Stoic practice here is to mentally separate your actions from others' reactions. You are responsible for behaving with integrity, speaking truth, and honoring your values. You are not responsible for how others process or respond to those choices. Remember this Stoic truth. If you need approval, you've surrendered power. The moment your well-being depends on another's validation, you've placed your center of gravity outside yourself. The Stoic reclaims this power by accepting that disapproval is the price of authenticity, and it is always worth paying. This doesn't mean become callous or disregards others' feelings. Rather, understand that true respect for others includes allowing them the dignity of their own responses, without manipulation or excessive management. Think of it this way. When you take responsibility for others' emotions, you're implicitly treating them as less capable than yourself. You're assuming they can't handle disappointment, can't process your honest no, can't adapt to your legitimate limits. This isn't respect. It's a subtle form of condescension. True respect acknowledges others' capacity to manage their own internal states. It trusts that most adults can handle honesty delivered with civility. It recognizes that by honoring your own boundaries, you're actually inviting others into a more authentic relationship with you, one based on truth rather than placation. Part 3. The Stoic Framework for Boundaries. When we distill Stoic wisdom on personal sovereignty, 3 essential principles emerge, what I call the 3 C's of Stoic boundaries. First, clarity before action. A boundary set without self-knowledge is merely a reaction. Before establishing boundaries with others, the Stoic first establishes clarity within. They ask, what truly matters to me? What serves my highest good? What aligns with my nature? Only then, from this place of inner certainty, do they draw their lines. As Seneca advised, if one doesn't know to which port one is sailing, no wind is favorable. Without clarity about your values and limits, you'll constantly find yourself adrift in others' expectations. This clarity requires regular self-examination, a cornerstone of Stoic practice. Marcus Aurelius would review his day each evening, questioning his reactions and examining his values. This wasn't self-criticism, but self-understanding. By knowing precisely what matters to you, boundaries become natural extensions of your values rather than arbitrary rules. Let me illustrate this principle with an example from professional life. Imagine you value deep work and creative thinking, but work in an environment of constant interruption. Without clarity, you might establish a reactive boundary like, "Don't bother me when I'm busy," a vague rule likely to be ignored or resented. With Stoic clarity, you would first identify the specific conditions you need for your best work. Perhaps it's uninterrupted time between 9 a.m. and noon. Perhaps it's advance notice for meetings rather than impromptu summons. These specifics emerge from self-knowledge, understanding your optimal working conditions. Your boundary then becomes precise. I'm available for spontaneous discussions after 2 p.m. each day. Or, I need meeting requests 24 hours in advance to ensure I'm fully present. Notice how these boundaries aren't complaints about others' behavior. They're clear statements about what enables your excellence. This clarity extends to every domain of life. In relationships, clarity might mean understanding your need for solitude, your communication style, or your non-negotiable values. With family, it might mean defining what support you can offer and what lies beyond your capacity or role. In each case, the boundary begins with knowing yourself, not reacting to others. Second, calm over confrontation. Notice how those with true inner strength rarely raise their voice. They don't need to. Their boundaries aren't enforced through emotional displays or threats, but through unwavering serenity. Epictetus reminds us, any person capable of angering you becomes your master. When you set boundaries from a place of reactive emotion, you've already compromised your position. The Stoic boundary is maintained not in heated moments, but in cool reflection. This calm has a counterintuitive power. Consider how differently we receive a boundary delivered with anger versus one delivered with tranquility. The angry boundary, "Stop interrupting me, it's so disrespectful," often provokes defensiveness or counterattack. The calm boundary, "I'd like to finish my thought before moving on," carries an authority that's harder to dismiss. There's a profound psychological reason for this difference. Emotional reactivity suggests that your boundary is negotiable, that it exists only in response to provocation rather than from firm principle. Calm suggests the opposite, that your boundary exists independent of the current situation, rooted in enduring values. I've observed this principle at work in leadership contexts. The leader who explodes when their authority is questioned reveals insecurity about that authority. The leader who calmly restates their decision without defensiveness demonstrates true confidence. One is trying to prove something. The other has nothing to prove. The Stoic practice here involves what I call the preparatory pause, a moment of mental distance before responding to boundary violations. When someone encroaches on your limits, take a breath. Remember that your boundary exists not because of their action, but because of your values. Respond from that center rather than from reaction. In practical terms, this might mean saying, "I understand you need an answer quickly. I'll need until tomorrow to give you my best thinking on this." Rather than the reactive, "You always put me on the spot like this." The content may be similar, but the delivery changes everything. Third, consistency without compromise. The Stoic understands that inconsistently applied boundaries invite testing and negotiation. They don't waver in their limits or make exceptions that contradict their principles. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "If it is not right, do not do it. If it is not true, do not say it." This simple clarity governs the Stoics' actions day after day, creating a consistency that others can rely upon. When your word becomes unquestionable, your boundaries require less defense. Consider how children test inconsistent boundaries. If a parent says no screen time after 8 p.m., but makes exceptions whenever the child persists, the boundary becomes meaningless. In fact, it becomes a starting point for negotiation rather than a true limit. Adults aren't so different. When you're inconsistent with your boundaries, you train others to ignore your initial statements and push for exceptions. Your no becomes merely the opening position in a negotiation rather than a final answer. The Stoic practice here is to state boundaries you can maintain consistently. Better a modest boundary upheld with consistency than an ambitious one that collapses under pressure. If you know you can't maintain "I never check email on weekends, perhaps I check email once on Sunday evenings" is the boundary you can actually sustain. This consistency extends to the consequences of boundary violations. If you've stated that meetings starting more than 10 minutes late will proceed without you, then you must follow through, even when it's inconvenient or when the late arrival is someone important. Exceptions teach others that your boundaries are flexible if the stakes are high enough. And perhaps most importantly, the mature Stoic practitioner understands that lengthy justifications dilute power. They don't debate their boundaries or seek approval for them. They simply embody them through action. When you decline an invitation that doesn't serve you, no explanation is required beyond "I won't be attending." The need to explain often reveals an underlying insecurity about our right to the boundary itself. This doesn't mean the Stoic is rude or abrupt. It means they understand the difference between polite brevity and defensive over-explanation. "I'm unable to take on that project" is complete and respectful. Adding 6 reasons why communicates uncertainty about your right to decline. Think of boundaries like the banks of a river. Without firm, consistent banks, the river disperses its energy, becoming a shallow, stagnant marsh. With clear banks, that same water flows with power and purpose. Your energy works the same way. Consistent boundaries don't live. Part 4. Real-world application. Let's move now from philosophy to practice. How do we implement these timeless principles in our daily lives? In the workplace, Stoic boundaries might look like this: declining projects that don't align with your strengths or values without lengthy apologies, setting clear expectations about your availability, addressing disrespect directly but without emotional charge. Consider this scenario. You're in a meeting where your expertise is relevant. but a colleague repeatedly interrupts or talks over you. The reactive response might be internal frustration followed by disengagement, or perhaps escalating to match their energy with forceful interjection. The Stoic response is different. When interrupted, you might say calmly, "I wasn't finished speaking, as I was saying." Notice the structure of this response. It's not accusatory. "You keep interrupting me." It doesn't appeal to authority. The meeting rules say one person at a time. It simply states a fact and continues. This calm assertion usually works because it carries the weight of self-respect. If the interruptions continue, the Stoic might address the pattern directly, still without heat. "I notice I've been interrupted several times. I'd like to complete my thoughts on this matter." Again, no accusation, just observation and a clear statement of what you need. In more persistent cases, you might speak with the person privately. "I've noticed that during meetings, I'm often unable to complete my thoughts before you jump in. This limits my ability to contribute effectively. In future meetings, I'd appreciate the space to finish my points." The focus remains on the specific behavior and its impact on your work, not on character judgments or emotional reactions. Another workplace example: your supervisor regularly emails you tasks late Friday that require immediate weekend attention. The people pleaser in you might just accept this pattern, growing resentful but outwardly compliant. The reactive boundary setter might snap after the 10th occurrence, sending an angry email about work-life balance. The Stoic approach: after the first or second occurrence, you might say, "I've noticed tasks arriving Friday evening that need weekend attention. I typically disconnect on weekends to restore my energy for the week ahead. For urgent weekend matters, I can be reached by phone. For non-urgent matters, I'll address them first thing Monday morning." This sets the expectation clearly, without drama or accusation. In personal relationships, Stoic boundaries mean stating your needs plainly without emotional manipulation. It means declining invitations that don't serve you without fabricating excuses. It means responding to subtle disrespect, not with matching disrespect, but with clear acknowledgement. For example, a friend consistently arrives 30 to 45 minutes late to your meetups. The typical response might be growing resentment, passive-aggressive comments, or eventually an emotional confrontation after months of frustration. The Stoic approach: after the second occurrence, you might say, "I notice we have different approaches to timing. When we set a meeting time, I'll be there within 5 minutes of that time. If you're running more than 15 minutes late, I'll likely start without you, or may need to leave before you arrive if I have other commitments." Then, and this is crucial, you follow through consistently. No anger, no character assessment about their chronic lateness or disrespect for others' time. Just a clear statement of how you operate and what they can expect. This approach respects their autonomy. They can choose to arrive when they wish. While honoring your own, you won't repeatedly sacrifice your time. Another relationship example: a friend or partner makes cutting remarks disguised as just joking or being honest. The people pleaser laughs along while feeling diminished. The reactive boundary setter might eventually explode with accumulated hurts. The Stoic says simply, "That remark felt dismissive. That's not how I expect to be addressed." Or more directly, "I don't find humor at my expense enjoyable. I'd prefer we not do that." Again, no character assessment, no escalation to the relationship's overall health or history, just a clear statement about the specific behavior and your limit around it. Within family dynamics, where boundaries are often most challenging due to long-established patterns and deep emotional ties, the Stoic practices what I call compassionate immovability. They understand the emotional currents but remain anchored to their principles. For instance, perhaps your family has a pattern of invasive questioning about your personal choices, your career, your relationships, your parenting decisions. The typical response is either defensive justification or avoidance of family gatherings altogether. The Stoic approach might sound like, "I understand you're interested in my career decisions. I'm not seeking input on this matter right now, but I'd love to hear about what's new in your life." If the questioning persists, as I mentioned, "I'm not discussing my career decisions today. Should we find another topic, or would you prefer some quiet time?" Notice how this acknowledges their interest without engaging in the content they're pushing for. When family pressure mounts to compromise your values, perhaps attending an event you find morally objectionable, or participating in family traditions that no longer align with your beliefs, the Stoic responds not with defensive justification, but with calm conviction. "I understand this is important to you. My decision remains the same." This phrase deserves attention because of its elegant simplicity. "I understand this is important to you" acknowledges the other person's feelings without invalidating them. "My decision remains the same" reaffirms your boundary without reopening negotiation. No defense, no attack, no lengthy explanation of your reasoning or values, just acknowledgement paired with clarity. In all contexts, remember this principle: say it once, let your silence say the rest. High-status individuals, those with genuine inner authority, don't repeat themselves constantly. They state their position clearly, then allow the weight of their silence to do the work. This requires trust in your own worth and the patience to let consequences unfold naturally. Consider how differently we perceive someone who keeps restating their boundary versus someone who states it once with clarity. The former seems anxious about whether they'll be heard. The latter assumes they will be. One communicates uncertainty, the other communicates conviction. Begin with the dichotomy of control. Before setting any boundary, ask yourself, is this something within my control? If not, you may be attempting to control others rather than defining yourself. True boundaries aren't about changing others. They're about clarifying what you will and won't participate in. This distinction is subtle but crucial. "You need to text me when you'll be late" attempts to control another's behavior. "I wait 15 minutes past our agreed time, then I leave" defines your own behavior. The first invites resistance. The second simply establishes your operating procedure. Practice the pause. When your boundaries are tested, and they will be, resist the urge to react immediately. Instead, as Marcus Aurelius suggested, first, don't be dismayed by it. Nothing happens that isn't natural, and nothing natural is evil. Take a breath. Remember that the violation of your boundary says more about the other person than it does about the validity of your limit. This pause serves multiple purposes. It prevents reactive responses that often undermine our boundaries. It creates space to remember your values rather than responding from emotion. And perhaps most importantly, it demonstrates to others and reminds yourself that you're choosing your response rather than being triggered into it. In practice, this pause might be literal. "Let me think about that and get back to you," or simply an internal moment of recalibration before responding. Maintain equanimity. The power of a boundary lies not in how forcefully you defend it, but in how calmly you maintain it. When someone pushes against your limits, responding with anger actually diminishes your authority. The truly powerful response is one of composed reaffirmation. Consider the difference between these responses when someone pressures you to take on an additional commitment. Reactive. "I'm already overwhelmed and you keep piling on more. It's not fair." Composed. "As I mentioned, my capacity is full at present. I won't be taking on additional projects until next quarter. The first reveals emotional destabilization, which ironically often leads others to discount the legitimacy of your limits. The second demonstrates that your boundary exists independent of their pressure, a principle rather than a reaction. With anger actually diminishes your authority. The truly powerful response is one of composed reaffirmation. Conclusion: the quiet power of knowing your worth. As we conclude today's exploration, remember this: boundaries are not weapons to wield against others. They are not shields to hide behind. They are simply the natural expression of a person who understands their worth. The Stoic sets boundaries not to control the world, but to more fully engage with it on terms that honor their highest self. They understand, as Marcus Aurelius wrote, "Waste no more time arguing about what a good man should be one." In the same way, waste no more time explaining why your boundaries should be respected. Simply live in a way that respects yourself, and the right people will respect you in turn. This is the essence of Stoic boundaries: quiet, unshakable, and rooted in the deepest form of self-respect. Before we part ways today, I leave you with this challenge. Choose one place in your life where you've compromised too much. Perhaps it's at work, with family, or in a relationship. Reclaim it with a single sentence of calm resolve, not as an ultimatum to others, but as a commitment to yourself. Remember, self-respect is not loud. It doesn't announce itself or demand recognition. It simply stands in quiet certainty of its own worth. If you found value in today's session, consider subscribing for more Stoic wisdom applied to modern challenges. Until next time, remember, true power doesn't shout. It simply stands.